This is a Sandy Boy Productions podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to All Have Another podcast with Lindsay Hine. I'm your host, Lindsay. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today you're listening to episode 374, and my guest is Julie-Anne Staehli. Julie-Anne recently joined Team New Balance Boston. She is a 2020 Olympian for Team Canada. She ran the 5,000 meters at the Olympics. She has a 14:57 5,000 meter PR, which she brought that time down quite a bit in 2021, and you're going to hear about that journey. Julie-Anne is from a small town, and we talk about that in this episode. We talk about moving to the United States and joining Team New Balance Boston and what her dreams are for the future. Julie-Anne also recently just ran in her first World Indoor Championships team, and we hear about that. This is such a fun conversation. She has so many wise things to say in this episode that we can all apply to our lives. So I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did recording it with her. All right, friends. And this episode of the podcast is sponsored by Portland Bee Balm. Portland Bee Balm is amazing. They have lip balm and salve. And beyond the amazing quality of their balm, Portland Bee Balm is committed to creating sustainable products, which is hugely important to me. They are members of 1% for the planet, which means they donate 1% of revenue to organizations tackling our planet's most pressing environmental issues. This is so cool. Products that are useful, natural, and add value to people's lives and the world. Portland Bee Balm provides the best hydration for your lips with clean and simple ingredients. Since I put balm on my lips multiple times a day, it is very important to me that the products I'm using are clean and effective. Portland Bee Balm has so many different varieties of scents, but my favorite is the organ mint. The ingredients they source and the packaging they use all support health and well-being to the environment and community. So awesome. My kids also use the products, and actually one of my kids, their hands get really chapped, especially in the winter, spring months, and he's been using the salve on his hands, and it's been so helpful. So you can support Portland Bee Balm, which is a small family-owned business, when you go to portlandbeebalm.com and use the code SANDYBOY for 20% off your first order. And just know, friends, when you support sponsors of this podcast, you're supporting this show to keep it rolling. So if you're someone who buys lip balm, go buy it from Portland Bee Balm. You can get a huge multi-pack. Their prices are competitive. Highly recommend checking them out. portlandbeebalm.com. Use the code SANDYBOY for 20% off your first order. All right, friends, enjoy my conversation with Julie-Anne. Today on All Have Another, we have Julie-Anne Staehli on the show. Welcome to the show, Julie-Anne.
Thanks for having me on.
How are you doing? Are you in Boston?
I'm doing well, yeah. I just got back to Boston a few days ago. I took some downtime after World Indoors, and we're just kind of getting back into training before we head to Flagstaff.
Now, how long are you guys going to Flagstaff for?
I think it's sort of indefinite. I think we have it booked for a couple months, but I think maybe even through to the trials, then to World Outdoors in Eugene.
Okay, that's exciting.
Yeah, no, it's going to be my first kind of proper training camp at altitude. So I'm looking forward to just having that group and seeing kind of how I respond to that stimulus. So
exciting. So for listeners that might not know Julie-Anne yet, she is an Olympian, a 2020 Olympian, ran in 2021, obviously, in the 5,000 from Canada, and recently joined Team New Balance Boston. So just like such a big year you've had in the past 2 years, really. Let's talk about moving to the United States.
Yeah, so in September of last fall, I made the move to Boston after the games. And I think it wasn't really something I considered in terms of kind of transitioning into professional running, but I think it was definitely the right move. And I think after the Olympics and just getting a taste of that kind of world-class competition, I knew that, I have have more to give. And I think this next 2 years that I've carved out for myself until 2024, it just gives me that space and sort of environment to be able to just focus on running and see where I can take it for the next couple of years. So yeah, it's been amazing. The group is incredible. Mark is awesome. I think it was this sort of connection over the span of last outdoor season that I slowly, you see these people again and again, and you're competing with them. And, I started asking some questions, and then I came for a little trip down to Boston before I headed out to Japan. And I think that's when I knew that this would be a great fit. And it's been awesome just to have this many women at this level that you can train with every day.
So what was your training like before the move? You made the Olympic team for Canada. Who were you training with then, and where were you living then?
Yeah, so essentially I still had my university coach from 2012 all the way until the games. So Steve Boyd, I was coached by him, and I had relocated to London, Ontario after I moved away from university in Kingston. So it was a long relationship, and just really this consistency over time, I think, is what slowly, brought me to that level in terms of making my first Olympic team. And in terms of the training, I think it was tough. I was doing a lot on my own, recruiting, friends here and there to, like pace you on a bike and a workout. But I think it developed and made me strong in a lot of ways. But I think once you want to, once you're at this level, it takes that extra amount of push. And I think it's only possible when you're surrounded by like-minded individuals who can bring it every day in practice. And that's sort of where I'm at now, is being totally okay with getting my ass handed to me in every session, with the hopes that this is going to translate to some faster times on the track.
Yeah, it's super exciting. I saw you post somewhere like, I made it all the way to the top and now I'm at the bottom again. And it's like you made that big step in that training environment that you were in. And now this is your next, this is the next chapter to get to that stage again, but not on the bottom. I guess that sounds negative how I said it, but you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. That's exactly what it feels like. And I think it's a different place now because this is the highest level of competition. You're at the Olympics or you're at the World Indoors. So there is no step up. It's just, this is the race that you're given, and how are you going to, make those improvements to be able to be on that podium. And I think for myself, it's weird to think like you can only kind of go backwards at this point. And my career has been sort of this steady progression. And now it's at the point where, these little marginal, improvements, it's really just like you're slowly trying to squeeze out the last bit of performance. So it's really hard. And it's, I think you realize you're so fortunate to be able to do something like this, but there is, moments every day where you just question, are you good enough? Can you get to that level? Because after competing at Tokyo and just at World Indoors last couple weeks ago, I think it does it shakes things up a little bit, and it humbles you in a different way where you realize this is the best. And are you capable? Are you physically and mentally able to run at this level?
And what are some things that you do or people that you talk to convince yourself you belong and you will keep making those marginal gains?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of conversations. I think you talk to different people for different things. Right after the race, I think, you touch base with your coach, but there's not much that needs to be said. What the performance was. And, Mark was just pretty straightforward in terms of, the race played out, and that was a tough kind of field. And obviously there was a lot of people in there too. So I think, from my parents' perspective, talking to them, it's just, they're going to be proud no matter what, and giving yourself the best possible shot, but also making sure that the enjoyment and what you're doing is that you're enjoying that process every day, and that's not, being, overshadowed by, the pressure to perform. And I think, then you step back a little bit and you just think about, okay, you're here, this is, everything you've done up to this point has got you to this, level. So you sort of go back and forth between, are you capable? And then you realize, okay, wait, like I've done this before. There's been times in my career where I've had a plateau in performance and I was able to make that next push, and it took time, but you sort of come back to, what have I done? And, evidence that the, results, they speak for themselves. So a big thing for me is just working with a sports psychologist. And it's been exactly a year now that I've sort of had bi-monthly meetings where we just sit down and, where am I at? How do I feel, pre-post race, and just kind of hash it out and then refocus. And, I think you can have a lot of feelings towards, how your performance went and everything, but you have to be able to like discipline that emotion and be able to sort of channel it and take from it, because those learning experiences, I think, come the most from when your performance is not at the best. When everything's going well, it's easy. But I think this is exactly that growth kind of spurt that I had like a year ago, even just trying to qualify for Tokyo.
Okay, so Tokyo, and you just made your first world indoor team, 2 huge teams to make, 2 world stage competitions. Tell me about like the difference that you felt between the two. Like with worlds indoors, did you feel like, okay, I know what I'm doing. I've been here before on this world stage. And how did you process that?
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities, I think, and mostly just because of the competition. You look on the start line and you're like, this is familiar. We've got, with a 3K though indoors, it's funny because it sort of smushes together the 5K, 1500. So now you're bringing together athletes from sort of either side and distance. So I could argue that it's even more competitive perhaps than trying to make an Olympic final. That said, I think pressure wise, the Olympics, there is something about, a competition being every 4 years, or I guess 3 to 5 years now that we're in a kind of different cycle. But, I think in Tokyo, it was this feeling of trying to take it all in while still focusing on the performance. Being my first Olympics, you're sort of going in with this sort of overwhelming experience. World indoors for me was just this excitement. I didn't know if I'd have an indoor season, as I was still in Canada in January waiting for my visa to come through. So it ended up being this sort of like week to week. Okay, now I have the standard. Okay, now, I'm in the ranking to be able to be selected for Worlds. And then, okay, now I'm going to Worlds, but, I have to make sure I don't get COVID, or, I make it there and everything goes smoothly. And so until I was on the start line and the gun went, did I feel like, okay, I'm at the World Indoor Championships. And I think I love the 3000. The indoor track has always been something I've, really enjoyed. And I think it was just another realization like this, you are at the top. And I think it's, performing on that stage, there's so many things that have to go right to be able to have your best day, but your best day might still be last because now everybody in that race can run just as fast as you. And I think just looking at the heat sheet before and, everyone's personal bests, you're just, it is overwhelming in a way, but I think that's what we're here for, is to see, on the given day, like who can perform.
I want to talk about your coach a little bit more before Mark. What was his name again? Steve. Okay. So I read somewhere that you were having some struggles during, was it your senior year of college?
I mean, there were struggles throughout. I would say really between kind of that second year to third year was sort of a little bit of setback.
I just love that what he told you was, I want you to be healthy, I want you to be happy, and I want you to run fast, in that order. Like, how important was it for you to have a coach who cared that much about your mental health over your physical achievements?
Yeah, that was a very, I think, formative experience. Just when I think back to second year, and I sort of made this leap in terms of improvement. It wasn't that natural kind of progression. I went from, all Canadian, which is top 14 at the national championships, and then I won in my second year. So there were a number of factors. I think it was just the seriousness and how much, I really just narrowed in and focused on running, and then, the results came. And I think at that point, no one's questioning when things go well. You're performing, it seems like the pinnacle, but in terms of health and physically, mentally, I was not well. And I think looking back, it's almost just a blur to remember, that second to third year, and then having my first injury was just overwhelming. I was not mature at all as an athlete. It was an Achilles sort of tendonitis issue, and just such a stubborn mindset. I think I was just not willing to give. And I think that was the point where my coach had stepped in, and he just said, nothing outweighs your health and your happiness as an athlete. And that's the only thing that's going to, allow you to have a sustainable kind of career in sport. And even though now I look back, that's 10 years ago, and I'm, I should be a lot, more mature and have a lot more wisdom and, the way you approach injury or training or setbacks and performances and success, all of that. But that mantra still holds true for me, that, healthy, happy, and running fast. Because even at this level, there's this tipping point where you question, okay, can I, what can I manipulate? What can I control? How much can I, push this until, your body is going to say, no, that's too much. So it hasn't changed. I think I remind myself every day, this is like the order in which you have to approach the sport.
Yeah, it's so smart. Is there anything you've done differently? I mean, it's been almost a decade, 8 years since, you're kind of talking back to that younger you. And it sounds like it's a kind of a daily reminder you have to talk yourself into. And also, I know that now you take a more holistic approach on life in general, like running is not the only thing. How have you developed the maturity to nurture those other pieces of your life?
Yeah, I think I'm still figuring it out. It's interesting because now running is the focus. Mm-hmm. I never thought I would be doing this for a living. This is when I thought about being a student athlete, it was one-to-one. I always had something else that I could fall back on, that, I work hard in practice. I work hard, in school. And then, if one thing's not going well, you pull on something else, and it always allows you to have kind of that default. Now my whole life I've moved to Boston. I've put myself in this position. I don't have another life outside of this. I think for some athletes, they have, family and kids, or, other, a career or profession, and they'll go between the two. And I think for me, now it's finding other pieces that that still make me feel grounded. And I think it's just allowing yourself to enjoy life outside of sport, and go for your run, focus on the workout. But then when you come home, you put that aside and you sort of forget about it. I always think we sort of had this short-term memory of this morning I just had a pretty big tempo session. And then in the middle of it, you're just I don't know how I'm going to do this. And then you finish and you forget about it. I come home, and then I'll go for my second session this evening. And it's funny, you just kind of live in these sort of very in the moment. And I think that's maybe one of the biggest transitions I've made, is not thinking too far ahead, and just what can I control right now? And I think that's the only thing that we can really ever, expect of ourselves. And that's actually useful to kind of have your attention. So, overall, I think it was, there's been a lot of kind of transition pieces, I think, that have to come into place to be able to get to the point where I am. But in a way, a lot has kind of been constant throughout that 10-year, I guess, span of performance.
I love that thought. What can I control right now? That's so applicable to every aspect of life. What can I control right now? And for racing, I mean, it's when you're in a race or when you're in a hard workout, okay, you might be freaking out a little bit. How am I going to do this in 2 miles? But what can I control right in this moment? That's so good. Is that a sports psychologist tip you've come along?
I think honestly, it's just that's life. If you sit too much in the past, or you're looking too much to the future, it's you're never where you are right now. And I think that for me has just been, I'm someone who wants to have, control over all aspects. And I realize that, even though I might think that I'm, manifesting this sort of trajectory towards where I want to be, there's so many things that are outside of my control. So the only thing I find comfort in is knowing today, what tasks can I accomplish? And, like, what can I get done? And not holding on to things that don't matter, like just sort of letting it roll off your back. And I think I've had to be really good at pivoting. And I think that's true for most everyone. But in the last 2 years, just being able to make a plan and then be fine with that plan not happening, because for whatever reason or restriction or, life happens and it doesn't go to plan, but there's always something that's going to come up from that. And then at that moment, you can decide, what's my next best move.
Hey everybody, a quick break here. I want to let you know about Therabody. I know a lot of you listening to this podcast are running quite a bit of miles, and part of upping your game and being able to take your running to the next level is making sure you're getting the recovery that you need. Recovery Air is a groundbreaking pressure massage for everybody anywhere. With Therabody's exclusive fast flush technology, Recovery Air flushes out metabolic waste more fully and brings back fresh blood to your legs at 3 times the speed of competitors. This will help you have a faster recovery. Therabody's Recovery Air Jet Boots are the first of its kind. They're truly wireless for anywhere on-the-go recovery, boosting circulation and radically reducing muscle soreness. And thanks to Recovery Air's super intuitive, easy-to-use one-touch controls, recovering faster is a breeze. Listen, I love that you can just take these things on the go. So if you're traveling after a race or anything like that, you can take these with you. So sit back, relax, and recover. Go to therabody.com/another to get your Therabody Recovery Air today, starting at just $699 or as low as $59 a month with Affirm. Plus, the Recovery Air's 60-day money-back guarantee and free shipping. There's no risk. Therabody.com/another. All right, back to the show. You mentioned your parents earlier, and it sounds like they've been a really great support system for you. Talk to us a little bit about your upbringing and introduction into running and other things you love. I see that you also love piano.
Yeah, I would say, maybe not a typical upbringing, I guess, from childhood, but I'm from a really small town, Lucknow, Ontario, and growing up, I did all sports that were sort of accessible or available, I guess, throughout elementary school. And I think slowly you start to feel like, you belong in some sports, or, you have sort of a natural ability. So I think for me, cross country and track, once I got to high school and you had to start choosing between seasons, that's sort of what took the precedent. And my parents, I think it's always just been support. And there's never been a pressure, they're obviously really proud, but if tomorrow I said, I'm really not enjoying this, there would not be one, question in terms of, I think they trust me completely in my judgment of, my approach to the sport. They know that I'm, putting my whole heart into it, but I think for them, it's more important to see me enjoying it. And that's whatever it is that I want to do. I think they're just supportive in that way. So I think having kind of a general upbringing in terms of sport, and that helped me, I think, a lot. And the small town, it's funny because I always just think about, what it means to represent your country, but just as well as being from such a small community, people recognize that and your accomplishments. So in a way, you feel bigger when you're from a small area than, if I was from Toronto. There's so many Olympians that came, from that big, GTA area. So for me, it was really, really special. And to go home, it always feels like this sort of reset, and to be able to ground myself again, running on, the gravel roads that led me to Tokyo. And I'm thinking, I was running those same roads back in high school. It's sort of a cool experience. And I never take that for granted.
That is beautiful. You probably don't know this song. It reminds me of that Miranda Lambert song, Everybody's Famous in a Small Town, or something like that. Do you know what song I'm talking about? Yeah. Everybody dies famous in a small town. That's so interesting to hear too. I'm always like, I want to live in a bigger city or town because I just want more things to do. But my friend Sarah Canny, she lives in a small town. She recently posted something about like, don't underestimate the value and the beauty of living in a small town. Like there's so many beautiful things about that. Do you think about that? Like if you ever want to raise a family or wherever you want to settle one day, like do you think about being in a place like you grew up?
Yeah, I really don't know where I'm going to end up. I think that's a huge question mark for me just because there's been so many things that have changed in the last 5 years. Like you make this plan and then it's like, okay, next thing you're living in the US. But there is something to be said about the community aspect, that connection that you have. A lot of people will say, you move to a city because of opportunity,
Sure.
But I would argue that, then, competition. And I think, I was just saying to my parents going home, it's like, you're not fighting for a parking spot. You're not fighting for, you're not paying for everything, every move that you make. And there's this sort of breath of fresh air. And I don't know if people from the city would have the same experience if they were to go into a rural community because, maybe then it's too quiet or too isolated or too, sort of distant from, where they feel like they're at home. But for me, it's like that sort of like slower life is something that actually gives me sort of like energy and fulfillment and just makes me feel like I can, sort of refocus and reset before things take off when we're on the road traveling and training.
Wow, I love that thought. I mean, that's why we go on vacation to quiet places, right? It's like it gives you that reset and that calmness. So is Boston like culture shock for you? Because not only did you move to a big city, like you moved to Boston. I feel like everything on the East Coast, and this is me coming from the Midwest. I now live like Southeast Coast, but it's like everything is so fast and loud there that it really stresses me out. Tell me how you feel about it.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a transition. I don't think I really knew. This is like, I don't know if this is just me, but I sort of am naive when I make these jumps in my life, even going to university. But Kingston was relatively small, like maybe 150,000. And then I moved to London, which was a bit bigger, like 400. And now being in Boston, I'm thinking like, this is like, I don't know, maybe like 5 times the size, but it does have a small town feel in some way. I think it's the most similar to a Canadian city in terms of climate. So that even makes me feel somewhat at home just because there are seasons, there's that long fall. But there are things that like, I'm not used to, or just, people always joke about like driving in Boston, it's sort of it can be a little bit intimidating sometimes, but I think having the team to come and move here and just be able to, have that support was immediately sort of a comfort for me. I think, immediately you have like 7 other friends that you can call on and, finding your running routes and exploring the city. And then once you have a little bit of a routine, you start to explore and venture out a little bit. So I think it'll be nice to have, a few years here just to, live this chapter of my life.
Yeah, it's super exciting. I know anytime I usually choose not to drive, like I will take an Uber or my husband will drive when we're somewhere like Boston. I like get my feelings hurt if someone like honks at me or like I can't handle one time I was in this like bank area. I was trying to get into this ATM and I couldn't get the door open right. And this guy yelled at me because he was busy and I was trying to get his help. And I was like, ew, is this what people are like? And I'm totally stereotyping, but ever since that one experience, I'm like scared to approach people when I'm in New York City or Boston or somewhere like that.
No, definitely. You can't take it too personally. And I think there's a Canadian stereotype too that goes along with it. If there's someone that's trying to merge into the lineup in traffic and, I'll leave the space and hold it for them. And it's funny because they do a double take thinking like, there's no way you're going to let me in. And I'm thinking like, this is normal. Like back home, if someone's trying to like, you share the road, all traffic, it's better, but it's a faster paced life. And I think, you can't take it too personally. If someone's just honking at you, it just comes out of frustration maybe, but yeah. No,
all right. Different. Boston people chime in. Let us know your thoughts. Okay. I want to hear about the team, New Balance Boston, and working with Mark Coogan. I know I've talked to some other members of the team. Talk to us about your teammates. Who are you training with mostly?
Yeah, so we have 7 women on the team, and then Drew Piazza, an 800-meter runner. So we basically from 800-meter to 10K, I think there's someone for everything. That's sort of how I look at the group in terms of our performance and just in terms of ability and range. Katrina Coogan, Mark's daughter, she's sort of 5K, 10K, as well as Millie Palladino, sorry. And then Ellie Preer and Heather McLean, they're both in that 1500 range, although they can kind of go both ways as well. And then Shifra, Clary Butner, and Sarah McDonald, they're both shorter distance. So the group is a bit more international now. I think we have, between the US, Ireland, Great Britain, and then myself from Canada, it's cool to have this sort of mixed group. And I think especially being a Canadian coming into a US team, it allows me to benefit from that group without taking a spot in terms of qualifications. So, you're still representing your country, but you're able to train and, race and still compete with these women. But that's something I really, that I thought that was a huge plus. We don't have professional groups in Canada. So, yeah.
Who are some Canadian athletes, though, that you look up to that you feel like have kind of paved the way for your generation coming up?
I can't think of anyone in specific that I've kind of followed a path similar to, although, a lot of Canadians went to the NCAA for school and then likely they stayed and joined a pro group. Mind you, a lot of our Olympians were raised in the Canadian system, competed, in the U Sports program. So it's sort of interesting because I think there's a number of ways that you can approach it. Although I think your lifestyle and sort of what you value in terms of training and, if you have family or, if you're really a homebody, that plays into it a lot. So, there's been a few people that have moved into the US and it's nice because then you go to races and it's sort of like, you have those Canadian teammates as well. But I sort of like that it was a bit different and that, there wasn't already like 5 Canadians on the team and, I was just joining the group. I think I'm someone who likes to sort of start my own little path or journey and make it unique to me and not just sort of fall into things. But yeah, I think you can be successful in a lot of different programs, but it is an advantage to be able to have year-round training.
Yeah. What made you decide to stay in Canada for university as opposed to coming to the NCAA?
Yeah, I think at that point, I wouldn't have been ready to make that move, to move in terms of across the border. Mm-hmm. I wanted to leave home, but, it was just 5 hours from home where I went to school. So it wasn't totally intentional in terms of not choosing the NCAA. I think it was more so a lack of knowledge or just understanding of what it meant to run in the US. Looking back, I think everything, works out. You always talk about your university experience being the best possible. I think I could have had awesome experiences like in a number of different places, but I think for where I was at that point, it was the best move that I made.
Tell me about your parents, like how they feel about you coming to the US and being so far away from home.
Yeah, I think this is actually the first time that they sort of not questioned, but just made me think a little like about what this meant in terms of a next step. And I remember coming home after the Olympics last summer. I think this was in August, and my dad just sort of sat me down. We were having lunch, and I think he just wanted to give me the space to be very open in terms of, is this what I want, or is this just making sense in terms of my move? Because I think after you perform at that level, the next question is, are you going to try and go towards Paris? What's your next goal in terms of running? Where, are you going to race the rest of this summer? And I think he just wanted to know that this was coming from me and not from the outside in terms of, the expectation that you're going to pursue this for the next, Olympic cycle. So that was, I think, important to me, just to really think about what it meant to make that transition. The US, you jump through a number of hoops, I think, just travel wise, visa requirements. There's a lot of things that, healthcare that you don't think about until you make that transition. Like staying in Canada would have been much easier by far. But sometimes the easy option is, oftentimes actually, it's probably not going to be the one that's going to, push you, or you're going to have that growth the same. So, it was, I think for my parents, at least, they sort of took the back seat and just trusted me that, I'd be able to make this happen, but always knowing that, if it doesn't work, that's okay. Like, what's the worst that can happen? You can always come home. It's not like, that option is taken away from you. So I think that's something I always am really grateful for, just having them, knowing that they have my back.
Yeah, that's really special. How are you managing your days? So you're running twice a day, doing strength training quite a bit, but you mentioned a lot of athletes have all these other things. Like, maybe they have a family, maybe they have I just interviewed Elena Tab and she's a teacher full time, So you have multi-passions. How are you balancing that? Like, I want to do other things, but this is my main focus. Let's talk about that topic a little bit.
Yeah, it's funny how you can fill your day. When I think about kind of a Monday to Friday schedule, like I'm doubling 4 times a week. Our morning sessions take the majority. Like I leave at 9, I come back at lunch. In the afternoon, you try and get a little bit of work done, emails or meetings, lay down for a little bit. And then if, you have treatment or something like that, that usually takes another hour and a half. And then, that second session, I'll fit in weights and training. And then, by that time it's dinner and you're sort of winding down for the evenings. So it's weird to tell people that it's not a normal life. But I think what's underestimated is the amount of time that you're spending in travel. And I think from January until the end of summer, we're essentially on the road. Like Boston is sort of our base camp, but we're either in Flagstaff training or away at races competing. So really the fall from September until December is when we're in Boston and you're basically stationed and you're not traveling around too much. But depending on what you qualify for in teams, you're on the road a lot. So being good at traveling and just packing well and finding kind of the little comforts and making sure that you sort of like lean in, I guess, to different, environments and training. And I was in California for 3 weeks before heading to Worlds. So it's this almost whiplash back and forth as you make your way across the country. But I think that's something I can do now and that I don't take for granted that, later on in life, when am I going to be able to do this? And I think that's something, I'm taking full advantage of. This is, a selfish time in your life that you can dedicate this to. And then, later on I can see other things coming first versus just, training and running.
So when did you say you're heading to Flagstaff?
So we'll be heading there just around Boston Marathon weekend there, the 18th.
So you leave before the marathon?
Some of us will be staying to race with the mile and 5K.
Uh-huh.
I'll actually be heading out before that weekend, but that's mid-April.
Do you have feelings on leaving before the hoopla?
Yeah, I think it gets pretty chaotic here in Boston. I wonder what the airport's going to be like that weekend, but we were here in the fall because they did have the marathon in October, I believe that was. Or November. So that was kind of special to see it as well. But definitely, like I live on mile 22 here.
Fun.
So it is kind of cool to think like you're right there. But I'm hoping, in future years we'll have an opportunity to take part.
Okay. So you got to experience it in the fall. Did you get out on the course?
We did. Yeah. There's, obviously pretty spectator friendly, but yeah, we were able to get out there. And although, with COVID, it was still a bit restricted. So hopefully this year, it's, it'll be the full experience. But and let's hope for good weather as well.
I know. I'm trying to think, what was the weather like in the fall?
The fall was a little humid.
It
I
was a
think
little
that,
humid. Okay.
yeah, they seemed to struggle. I think it wasn't hot, but it definitely was, the air was thick.
Hey, everybody. I want to tell you about the Amino Company. Strength training has been an integral part of my workout routine for the past 2 years now. But sometimes it's really hard to get motivated to strength train because running is my jam. That is like the thing I want to do. And I'm assuming many of you feel that way as well. I've been on the lookout for something that could help with energy and focus for that strength training. A lot of times I will do a harder interval session with running and then go right into my leg workout with strength training so that I am not doing my intervals or long runs on tired legs. I'm doing the strength training session on the tired legs from the workout. And I started taking Perform, which is a product from the Amino Company, and have noticed a big bump in my energy during those strength training routines. It helps improve strength performance, reduces fatigue, and increases muscle protein synthesis so that you recover faster. I love how I feel when I take Perform, but I also appreciate it even more that it's backed by actual science. In fact, the research on amino acids and performance enhancements is well documented, with hundreds of studies demonstrating their effectiveness. Now, this is cool. The Amino Company's Perform was created by lead scientist and co-founder Dr. Robert Wolfe. He's completed 62 marathons in under 2 hours and 30 minutes. Yeah, you heard that right. So you can even use Perform during your long runs and workouts to increase focus and performance during the run itself. If you're looking for a nutritional advantage when it comes to boosting your peak athletic performance, I highly recommend you give Perform a try. And right now, you can get 30% off by using the code SANDYBOY when you visit aminoco.com/SandyBoy. Plus, get a free gift with every purchase. That's aminoco.com/SandyBoy. Use the code SANDYBOY for 30% off your order. All right, back to the show. Okay, let's talk about that breaking 15 minutes in the 5,000 for the first time and those big jumps you took in 2021. I mean, was that the big year?
It was, yeah. I think that was really, when I think back to my whole season last year, the most special was breaking 15:10 for the first time, actually, to get under that Olympic standard. Even though I went on to run sub 15, I think that was really kind of that, like, the pinnacle, and then qualifying.
How did you get to that self-belief? Like, I can hit this standard.
Well, if you told me that it would have taken sub 15 to make the team, I probably wouldn't have even tried. No, I shouldn't say that. But it was it was a step by step. And as I said before, like being in the moment, every race that I ran, I just I just checked it off. You know, every time I stepped on the track, I had run a personal best. So I think there was some momentum and motivation that came from continuously taking off seconds, because I had run 5,000s over the course of a few months to be able to get to the point of running, you know, under the standards. So I came in with a PB of, 15:47, and then I scrambled it up to 14:57.
Wow.
So, it was sort of this huge jump. But every time that I performed, I think I remember the first race in Austin, I was, in tears after, thinking like, there's no way, like 15:32, like I'm still like 200 meters off this time. But then you sort of shake it off. You give yourself that 24 hours and just let yourself sit in it. And I think those are exactly the defining moments of which path you're going to choose. Are you going to choose I'm going to challenge this and see, what I'm capable of? Or am I going to choose just to, let that be, the reason that I'm going to step away? And I think both have merit. You can justify it either way of why you want to pursue and why you want to step aside. And I think for me, it was just writing it out on paper, my goals, and knowing that, like, in terms of qualification, if I made the team, amazing. If I didn't, that was fine too. It was not this sort of be all end all. It was just sort of like a reason for me to just continuously work towards that without being too focused on Tokyo. And I think that is really important from the athlete perspective, is just to make sure that, you have this outcome, you have this goal, but what's more important is focusing on, those steps that you're taking to get there, and really being in that moment of, that journey towards it. Because if you're too outcome focused, like it's, then there's so many, it's going to deter you, I think, in a lot of ways. It can be really intimidating when, your times are not really where they need to be. And then you kind of question what you've been doing. But I think that consistency, and in a way, I guess, not caring too much, obviously wanting to do well, but not letting it sort of get under my skin, where I thought, okay, like, am I really capable? And I think now I'm experiencing that same feeling of, am I good enough? Like, is this actually possible for me to be, one of the best? And I think it's the same situation, just now a different level.
Yeah. Somebody needed to hear that is listening to this podcast, because we have people that are like, Boston Marathon qualifier or nothing. Like, that is what I want to live or die on. That's what I want to get. But when you're so focused on that specific time, you're kind of taken away from the experience of getting there, and like how many steps you've taken when you do have the race that maybe you do or don't qualify for. But like, I think if you obsess over that number or that time so much, like, you're kind of like belittling the work that you did.
Oh, absolutely. And that's, I think, coming back again to like last season. Yes, I went to the Olympics, but when I think about my happiest moment, or just more, it was 100%, it was Mount Sac in California in the middle of May, running, 15:02, and just thinking like, how can I get better than this? And I think that's such a satisfying feeling. And I've had that, that moment of realization now a few times, even when I was back at the training camp in February when we were in San Diego, and just thinking like, if this is it, like, it's been good. And, I would actually say that to people, I think. And even just talking to my parents, I'm like, they probably think this is a little bit morbid, but if tomorrow's my last day, like, this has been so fulfilling. And I think if you can live like that, just to think like, I'm 28 now. And of course, there's so many goals that I have set out for myself. There's so much I still want to do and accomplish. But if this is it, like, if this is really, in terms of where I've come and what I've done in the last, even just 10 years, I think there's so much that I've filled, this time with. And I think I find comfort in that. And now looking ahead, of course, you want to make another Olympic team. You want to go to Paris. You want to check all these boxes. And I have, so many times and goals written out. But in the end, it's just that the day-to-day, that process, this now being with a group of women and, having all these friends around. And I think that to me is just so much more meaningful. And Mark reminds us that often, it's, you want to be one of the best, but it's more important just, to be a good person and enjoy that whole experience. So I definitely have leaned into that.
I love that you give a nod to your community of runners that you're with. I sort of recently interviewed Lori Hennes, who's the coach at NC State. And we were talking about how her team won the national championship. And one of my favorite pieces of that conversation is she just talks about, like, more than wanting to win and wanting to be the best, these women like to be together. They enjoy each other's company. They want to be together. And I think that when you can create a training environment like that, like it sounds like you have, like, you're just setting everybody up for more success.
Yeah, no, and it's not a team sport, but it is. And I think about that all the time now. Being amidst a group, it's like there is strength in the herd. There is, you kind of put yourself aside a little bit to see the betterment of the group. And even if, you're not having your best day, well, someone else is. And, you have the support around you. I think there's, sometimes, like, even in the midst of a workout, I'm just thinking like, oh my gosh, we have another 10 minutes at this pace. Like, I don't know if I can hang on. And then you just look around and you're like, you know what, like, we're all in this right now together. Everyone's hurting. We can either, slow down a little bit and settle in, or you just stop looking at the watch and you just, focus on, okay, you're looking at their back and you're just sort of like, you run within yourself. And I think this is going to be that transition I need to make, and especially in terms of racing and performing, is not being so fixated on the clock and the splits and just running what's given to you, running the race that's happening in that moment. Because up until now, I've been really good at hitting a time, looking at the splits, running a standard, checking the box. But that's not how it works once you get to the level of, a championship style race. So I think that team environment is exactly what gives you sort of, looking at the people around you and using that as sort of, that next push.
What do you say to yourself when you are in those moments? We have listeners that are doing their own hard workouts at their own level. And there are moments where we want to quit, or we think, I can't possibly do this another 5 minutes. What are some things you tell yourself to stay in the game?
I think I hear this from marathoners a lot. It's just, whether it's within every 5K checkpoint, but just running in, run the mile that you're in sort of, and not looking too far ahead. I think I'm someone that will take the full workout and then break it down from there. So coach, they'll say, well, 25 minutes tempo. So I look at that whole 25 minutes and I think, okay, this is about the distance that we're going to cover. I can expect, that we're going to be finished around here. And then once we start, then it's sort of that, I'm getting to the next 3 minutes. I'm getting to the next, 10. Okay, now we're half. All right, now we have 2 minutes left, and not, checking back in too much. But I think what I do struggle with now is letting go a little bit of that control, because I think when you're training on your own, you control every aspect and you make it as hard as you want, but you can also justify that when it feels hard, that, for a number of reasons, that's why maybe you slow down, or, your second rep wasn't as fast. But now you have all these sort of points of reference when you're in this training group, and, there's really no excuse in terms of, you have so many people that are able to push you. And I think it's going to make me better to not have to be always setting the pace for myself, and just letting sort of go of that, that control piece of, I have to get, this rep needs to be, 78 or whatever. And I think Mark also, he is big on effort and less on time. And I think for people training on their own, just to remember that, depending on that day, whether, you're running 5 minute mile pace or whatever, that could be equivalent to, 5:20, depending on, what that feels like for you. So I think sometimes it's important to, let go of the watch a little bit and just, trust your instinct and trust the people around you, and just sort of let that carry you.
I want to talk about your heart for volunteering and philanthropy. I know you started the ReRun Shoe Project when you were in Canada. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so that was in 2016. It sort of came out of, I started with New Balance in 2015, and you realize how many shoes you accumulate as a runner. So I think for me, it was just this way of giving back, but also, looking at how many pairs of shoes, that people still appreciate. And I was living with 7 girls at the time, and it would be this sort of like, I'd pass along a pair of shoes that were still, perfectly good for everyday use, and, that were just maybe finished in terms of mileage. So then I started this project to be able to donate these shoes on an ongoing basis and have drop-off locations, at running stores and in the local community. So people could donate, and then, bringing these to either, youth sport organizations or shelters that could use the shoes. So it sort of grew from there, and now it's located in 3 cities across Canada. So it's sort of developed into this kind of bigger project. And, I didn't really have any, objective or goal in terms of that, but I think it's just been something that, that other piece that I have going on. And I think it's really important, especially in the sport as well, is, how can you give back? So we had a bit of a pause over the last few months here, and now moving to Boston as well. I'm just sort of in the midst of transitioning things over and stepping back a bit and just letting, other people kind of manage it from back home. But it is something that I feel like it's kind of cool to think about, where it started and now where it's going.
Yeah, you have this idea and you can do something about it, or you can just think about your idea and you execute it, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also read that did you volunteer for the Boys and Girls Club, and there's a Just Girls running club?
Yeah, exactly. So that came out of sort of the project as well. I had touched base with someone who was working at the Boys and Girls Club in Kingston, and essentially they saw a need for especially young girls in sport. How do we have that retention so that, they feel like this is something that they enjoy and belong in. And that's where the running club started out of. And then obviously through donations as well. I think, footwear is something that's sort of overlooked, but it's so important. If you don't have the right shoes to be able to participate, that's a big barrier. So that was sort of the partnership. And then once I moved from Kingston, I started it in London. And then now I've sort of, delegated in terms of role.
Yeah, it's hard to do that sometimes when it's something that you've created, like it's your baby, but it's time to move on and just kind of like handing over the reins to someone else. It's important, but it's hard.
Definitely.
Okay, so we always wrap up here with end of podcast questions. So we'll start with this question, which I think will be interesting now that you're like with this new group and, you set all these big goals and made them happen in 2021 with making the Olympics and then making your first Worlds team. What is something professionally or personally that you would like to do that you haven't done yet?
So I'd say professionally, I would say from a running perspective, I think making World Outdoors this coming year. I think I've never made that team, and now having a few opportunities from now until 2024. I think that's definitely a goal of mine, and making a final as well. That's something I've, talked to Mark a lot about, and then sort of writing out what times realistically you need to hit to be able to qualify for that. And then, personally, I think sort of figuring out, not necessarily like life after sport, but setting myself up in a way that, ties together the education that I have, in my background with, sports psychology and teaching and sort of how I want to navigate, towards, I don't want to say retirement. I hope I'm always involved in running in some capacity, but I think that's, my career is something I foresee. I don't see myself running professionally for life, but I think this is something I'm slowly working towards in terms of what that looks like. And student athlete success is something I've always been sort of passionate about at that university level, is supporting people at that stage where I remember, I think I made, a lot of mistakes in some ways, but a lot of growth as well. And I think being in a position where you can help guide and, facilitate that would be really cool.
Yeah, it's cool to think of you being someone who went through some challenges at that level, like being able to come in and with your psychology background, like really talk to these young women and help them get their head on right and help them like see what their potential is when they take care of themselves.
Definitely. Yeah. And just giving people a chance to be able to, there's so many other stressors in being that university environment. And I think, especially as a student athlete, you're expected to perform on all levels. And I think sometimes you just need that person that can just sort of validate how you feel and then focus on, okay, what can I control right now? And just, those coping mechanisms and strategies, I think is really important, because that translates to every aspect of what you're doing. Is, when you're presented with a challenge, how are you approaching that? And how, do you have the skills to be able to overcome it? So. Yeah,
I love that. What's the best, most recent book that you've read?
Well, I won't pretend that I'm some, a big reader, but I do. I'm sort of your, bi-monthly kind of book. But recently I just finished Normal People, which by Sally Rooney, I think. It's British-based novel, sort of just a bit of a like high school love story, but it was made into a show as well. So I'm actually just watching the series, and it's one of the best. Well done. It's on Hulu actually. So would definitely recommend. Nothing sport related, but definitely like a coming of age.
I haven't heard of that, and that's exciting that it's a show. Do you think that we should read it first?
Always
Yeah.
read.
I agree. The one show I didn't read first was Little Fires Everywhere. And I don't know if I regret it or not, but I almost always read the book first. It's way more fun.
Definitely.
Yeah, I saw you had a post with like all your books you read last year. That's a decent amount of books.
Yeah, usually, I mean, there's a couple that I still have not got to, but it was something I think I just set aside for myself as sort of a bedtime book rather than, watching a show or something. We spend a lot of time just on a screen, and I think there is something about having kind of a physical copy and just sort of getting lost in that. And especially fiction, I think I enjoy something that takes you outside of your own world for a little bit.
Totally. Okay, so Normal People, is that a good vacation book?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go pick it up. We're going to Sanibel on Friday. So I have like my spirituality books, my like self-help books. I need to add a vacation book that's not like scary. So I'll choose that. What do we end? Oh, we have 2 more questions. Who's someone fun, motivating, or inspiring you would like to have coffee, tea, or a cocktail with?
I would have to say the Obamas. I think if I had the opportunity to sit down and just talk, I think that would be definitely, I like from so many different aspects. I mean, I've read both of their books as well. And I think there's a lot to be said about their leadership. And I think even just their relationship and how they navigated that during Barack's time, I think that's something I just really look up to, and I don't think I'll ever get that opportunity, but it's nice to think about.
Which book should we start with if we haven't read either of their books?
I would say Becoming, Michelle's book, just because I believe it was released first, and it gives a different perspective to not so much, the work that was being done, but more so the background of how that changed their lives as a family, and then as well as how they stuck together and how they tried to keep some normalcy while raising 2 girls in the White House. And I think there's some warmth that Michelle has that I think so many people can relate to. And being a Canadian, I think it's interesting because we're not so politically driven. It's not the first topic of conversation, but coming to the US, it is really different in terms of that landscape. So I think it's something that I've sort of, explored a little bit more, especially now living in Boston.
Okay, what is your last message to leave with the audience today?
I think just from our conversation, I guess as a summary point, but I think it is really just what can you control in the moment and not getting too caught up on the things that, you don't either know yet or that you can't, control right now. And I think letting go of things that don't matter too much. I think you need to be able to filter out the noise. And I think from whether it's an athlete perspective or, just in your everyday life, but I think it is really important to give attention to the things that really matter to you. And that can even be in the form of, social media, following or unfollowing the things that really matter, relationships that you have, or, the goals that you've set out for yourself, just making sure that, those are in line with the values that you have and that are directing you towards the goals that you want to achieve. And I think that's always going to put you on the right path towards where you want to go. And, surrounding yourself with those like-minded individuals is only going to propel you. So, yeah.
That is wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me on.
All right, everybody. Thanks so much for being here today. Thank you, Julie-Anne, for sharing your story. What an awesome conversation. I am super inspired by you. You can find Julie-Anne on Instagram. She is JASTAEHLI on Instagram. You can find me personally on Instagram. I am Lindsay Hine626 over there. And hey, friends, if you are looking for a way to support the Donna Foundation, you know, I believe so much about the Donna Foundation and all that they're doing. I believe in them so much. They have a Mother's Day virtual race coming up that I'm going to participate in here from Raleigh. If you live in the Raleigh area, hit me up on Instagram, Lindsay Hine626, and we can run it together. There's an in-person race also in Jacksonville. You can sign up for the race when you just go to mdyw.breastcancermarathon.com. Use the code Lindsay10 and that'll save you 10% off your registration. And that money all supports the Donna Foundation. So let's go support this awesome organization year round. I'm so passionate about it. And again, if you're in Raleigh, hit me up on Instagram and come run this 5K with me on Saturday, May 7th. So that's mdyw.breastcancermarathon.com and code Lindsay10 to register. And when you message me, we'll figure out details about where we're running and all that. I've got some other friends that are probably going to join us. All right, friends, thanks for being here. This podcast is part of the Sandy Boy Productions podcast network. Check us out on Instagram, Sandy Boy Productions, as well as our new website, sandyboyproductions.com. You can find me personally, Lindsay Hine626 on Instagram. I'm at Lindsay Hine on Twitter, and we have a great Facebook group. I'll have another podcast over there. Thanks for being here. Have a great rest of your week, a wonderful Friday, and as always, we'll see you next Friday.